All right, so when a man is diagnosed with prostate cancer, he and his doctor are faced with this monumental question. Is this a slow-growing tumor that might never actually cause a problem? Or is it an aggressive, life-threatening cancer that needs to be dealt with right away? Today, we are going to dive into some incredible new research that's using AI to help get a clearer answer to that exact question. First things first, let's give a huge shout out to the team behind this amazing work. This research comes from the Systems Computational Biology Lab, and it's led by Dr. Ashok Palaniappan at Sastra University in India. It's just a perfect example of how we can use raw computational power to solve a very real, very human medical challenge. Okay, here's our game plan for today. We'll start by digging into the core problem, the puzzle itself. Then we'll look at the super clever strategy these researchers cooked up to hunt for genetic clues. We'll get to their big aha moment, see how they use that discovery to build an AI tool, and then wrap up with what all of this could mean for the future. So let's jump right in. Part 1, the prostate cancer puzzle. The whole thing really boils down to this one major challenge. How do you tell the slowpokes from the sprinters, the harmless tumors from the truly life-threatening ones? This is it. This is the question. Is the cancer aggressive, high risk, needs immediate treatment? Or is it indolent, which means it's slow growing and maybe, just maybe, the best path is active surveillance, just watching it carefully instead of jumping into invasive treatments? Getting this call right is absolutely everything. And here's why it's such a tough call. Prostate cancer is ridiculously common, but, and this is a huge but, most cases are actually the slow-growing kind. The problem is our current screening tools, things like PSA tests, they're not so great at telling the difference. This leads to a lot of overdiagnosis, way too many unnecessary biopsies, and guys getting treated for cancers that might have never hurt them, causing some really significant and totally avoidable side effects. So, to get around this problem, these researchers turned to data. They came up with a new computational strategy, basically a way to sift through a mountain of genetic information to find reliable clues that can tell these different cancer grades apart. And check this out. This flowchart is straight from their paper, and it shows their entire game plan. Now, it might look a little intense, but the core idea is a brilliant two-pronged attack. They took the same huge data set and ran it through two completely different analytical methods. Why? Because they figured if both methods pointed to the same genetic markers, they could be way more confident that they were onto something real. So let's zoom in on that. Let's really get into the nitty-gritty of this hunt for genetic clues and see how these two methods work. This is where it gets really, really cool. On one path, they used pretty standard statistical modeling to find individual genes that were either turned way up or way down in different grades of cancer. But on the other path, they used something called network analysis. I love this. Think of it as finding the social circles or the cliques of genes that all work together as a team. So you're not just looking for individual bad actors, you're looking for criminal gangs. And of course, none of this works without good data. And they had the best. They used a massive data set from the Cancer Genome Atlas. We're talking about gene expression data from over 550 samples, including normal tissue for comparison and almost 500 tumor samples, covering all 5 grades of cancer severity. Having that full spectrum is what makes their findings so powerful. So they ran their two completely different analyses. And what happened next? Well, this is the aha moment. This is where those two separate paths suddenly converged and pointed to something incredibly important. You see, the really crucial step was this. They didn't care about the genes that only one method found. They were looking for the overlap, the consensus, the specific genes that both the stats model and the network analysis flagged and said, hey, pay attention to this one. That intersection makes the signal so much stronger. So they started with thousands and thousands of genes. After running all the data, after all the cross-checking, how many made the final cut? Get this, just 35. That's it. They took this huge, complex problem and boiled it down to a list of just 35 critical biomarkers. And look at how those 35 genes shake out. Just a couple of them are linked to low-risk cancer, but the overwhelming majority, 33 out of the 35, are markers for the high-risk aggressive stuff. This is a massive clue. It strongly suggests they found the actual genetic signature that separates the lions from the lambs. Now, finding these biomarkers is a huge win, but the researchers didn't just pack up and go home. They took the next most logical step. They said, okay, we have this knowledge, let's turn it into a tool that doctors can actually use. And they built this AI, which they call PRADclass, using a really solid classic process. First, they told the AI to only pay attention to the expression of those 35 genes. Then, they trained a few different kinds of machine learning models to see which one was best at classifying tumors. And most importantly, they tested the winner on a totally separate dataset to make sure its performance was real. And the winner was a model called a random forest. It's a cool idea. You can think of it like a whole committee of expert decision makers that all vote on the right answer. And it proved to be the best at looking at the genetic data from a sample and making the call. Is this benign? Is this indolent? Or is this aggressive? So the big question, how well did it do? Well, when they tested it on that external dataset, data it had never laid eyes on before, PRADclass hit a balanced accuracy of about 86%. In the world of diagnostics, that is a very, very strong result, and it shows this thing has real potential. Okay, let's zoom back out. We've gone through the science, the data, the AI. But what does this all actually mean for the future? For patients and for doctors? I think the authors themselves put it perfectly in their paper. They basically said, look, we've created PRADclass. It's a validated AI model that uses these new biomarkers. It performs well, and it could be ready for clinical trials to help predict how aggressive a prostate cancer really is. So why does this matter so much? Because this gives doctors a potential new tool to classify a patient's risk much more accurately. That could directly lead to less overtreatment and fewer life-altering side effects. It's a huge step toward truly personalized medicine. And what's really great, the team made their tool available online for other academics, which just encourages more and more research. And I think it's important to mention one last thing about this study. This incredible, potentially life-saving work was done with no specific financial support, which, just makes the achievement that much more impressive. And all of this leaves us with a pretty profound question to chew on. We keep seeing studies like this, where massive data and clever AI unlock these deep secrets about diseases. So the question isn't really if AI is going to be a tool for doctors anymore, it's just how powerful will it get? Could it one day become a doctor's single most powerful tool in the fight against cancer? It's definitely something to think about.